Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Talking Acquisition. This is the weekly high-energy, informative, and slightly opinionated view on all things acquisition, procurement, and government contracting related. This is the place where the contracting community, the acquisition community, and our industry partners connect to talk, listen, and learn from each other. My name is William Randolph, and I am your host, and I'd like to introduce my co-host, my colleague, my partner, my friend, Soraya Carrera. Hello, Soraya. How you doing?
Hey, Will, how you doing?
I am great. I'm great. How are you?
I'm excited. I'm excited about our podcast and the year ahead that lies ahead of us. It was a great holidays, and I'm, continuing these holidays, and I think I'm going to celebrate Christmas all year long. What do you think?
It works. It works. Absolutely.
We got to keep that holiday spirit.
The spirit,
right? It
yes.
energizes us. It invigorates us. So, but it's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Awesome.
All right. You want me to kick us off with my
Let's do it.
All right. I might change the disclaimer for next year just to give us a little variety. I'm kidding.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Our podcast shares information and views on a variety of topics that impact the federal acquisition community. Our goal is to provide thought leadership and perspective, not to criticize, judge, or render political opinions, although we do let a few of those slip out. We provide this free service because we are former federal acquisition professionals and leaders. We believe that the creativity, innovation, and effectiveness of our community is unleashed when we share knowledge, information, and learning. We hope you enjoy our podcast, and we welcome the views and comments of our colleagues across the private and public sectors. And Will, I'm going to open on a little sad note, but I think it's appropriate since we're going to be talking a little bit about how we work with our business community out here, our industry partners, government and industry always working together. This weekend, I was saddened to hear that on Wednesday, December 22nd, our good friend Kevin Boshears passed away. For those who may not know, Kevin Boshears was the first Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization Executive Director at DHS. Kevin was a real nice guy. He was just a very pleasant person to work with. Over his 30-year career, I don't think there's a single person that would say a bad word about Kevin. Kevin was a huge advocate for the small business community, but in reality, he was an advocate for industry in general. Yeah. His focus was small business because he was the executive director of the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization, but he advocated for all industry. He was a great partner to the procurement community. I worked with him over 18 years, serving at the Department of Homeland Security. And I think it's fair to say, and maybe some will argue with me, but I believe he should be credited with creating one of the best small business programs in federal government.
Oh, absolutely.
Many agencies came to DHS to learn about our program and all the initiatives that he had going and all the activities that he planned to help small businesses understand how to do business with the government. So, I honor his memory. Absolutely. I send my condolences to his family, to his friends, and to all his colleagues across the Department of Homeland Security. To know Kevin was to love him. Rest in peace, my friend, Kevin.
Yes, rest in peace. One of the good guys. One of the good guys.
One of the great ones. One of the great ones in our business.
Yes, and one of the things that I think will tie into some of the things we're going to talk about today is the results spoke for themselves. Okay, when you look at the results of what his accomplishments, his leadership in the space was, I mean, and I think when I left, it was like 13 or 14 years of A pluses. From a small business perspective. And this was back in, 2016, 2015, 2016. So I'm sure that continued, through his retirement. So until he left government. But I'm a big believer in, we could talk about all the stuff, but let's look at the results.
Look at the result. Well, and it was, not only did we always exceed our goals, when they started taking the grades, just so that because I got a nice little plaque about this, 11 years in a row by the time I left. That's when they started taking the grades from the moment they started grade A or A+. We had, I think it was like 4 A+ in a row. And in fact, even in the year that I left this last year, they got an A. So his legacy continued. But what was really impactful was how he dealt with small business. He didn't shove it down your throat. He really worked with the contracting officers and the HCAs, the heads of contracting, to really have a discussion about when it made sense to have small business. And I'll tell you one funny story about he and I. So I always invited Kevin to all of my offsite events when I was head of contracting. I always included him. He always included me in his, right? That was the partnership that we had. And that partnership made a difference. I'm telling you, he was really good about working with the HCAs. But I remember he and I carved out the strategy for First Source 2 on the back of a cocktail napkin at one of our offsite conferences. We were waiting to go to dinner and we went into the bar to have a glass of wine because, you know, we do adult beverages out there. And we sat down and on the back of a napkin, literally, we laid out our First Source strategy. And he and I used to always joke around about we could come up with an answer to the question anywhere at any time.
Anywhere. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
All right. So our topic.
So with that, so I think it falls clearly into the what should be a continuation from last week. Is last week we had the message to industry, but what you should be thinking about going into the new calendar year. We're just going to turn that and we're going to focus that same end of the year messaging to our contracting community. And I think it's really appropriate to have that conversation. So I want to start off. So from a standpoint of the messaging to our community, it's an extension of the conversation we just had about Mr. Boshears. Is be memorable, okay? Make sure you give your organizations a story to tell, a positive story to tell about you. I remember in my career and as I grew in the career, moved up various organizations, I was really surprised at how many times people's names came up in conversations and they weren't there to tell it. Okay, someone else had to introduce somebody's name into a conversation. The pie was being cut well before the word, the messaging got out. People were behind the scenes thinking about who should be doing what to win and who should be teaming, who should be leading this. You have to give individuals, especially your leadership in this community, because the community is so small, you have to give people compelling stories to tell so that others can advocate and sponsor and be a champion for you when you're not in the room, because so many times you won't have the opportunity to tell your own story. So that's my number one, be memorable.
Yeah, I like that. I like that, be memorable. What I like to think about is strategize. This business that we are in, we're not buying for the sake of buying. We don't write contracts for the sake of a contract. And we're not just spending money. This is your money that you are spending. The message that I always try to give to the contracting community is this is your money. This is coming out of your pocket because hopefully you are a taxpayer. If you aren't, you're probably going to blow your security clearance. Just thought I'd mention.
Right.
But this is your money. And so treat it as such. And remember, the decisions that you make are impactful to those that you serve, the community that you serve, but also to industry. Industry is not your enemy, they're your partner. They're here to do a good job. I said it, I think I said this last week, and I've always said this, that 99% of the people that I meet in industry, they're not in it for the money. They really want to do a great job. Sure,
Yes,
we all got to pay our bills, right?
Yeah.
But they're really in it. They are as dedicated and as committed as we all are to the profession and to getting the job done. So strategize. Think about what you're doing. Think about the procurement that's before you and how you're going to execute that procurement. And remember, you're out to get the best deal for the government, not the cheapest deal, not the fastest deal. I hate cheap and fast. I like effective and efficient, right?
Yes.
Because, or I should say, yeah, effective and efficient, because it's about getting the best deal. It is about getting bang for the buck for the government. And that is not always cheap. You want to get a good quality solution. You want to get the right vendor or contractor that's going to deliver that product or service in a timely manner in the highest of quality, because that's what we deserve. That's what our citizenry deserves. That's what our first responders deserve. And that's what we all deserve as taxpayers.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So Soraya, I want to tee one up for you. I'm going to say my next one is about honoring the craft. But a piece of honoring the craft is really honoring the customer, in my opinion. You shared with me a story when you were talking about customer experience, customer service the last time we were talking. And I'd love for you just to share that because it was so powerful. It resonated with me from a standpoint of, that everybody in the chain of customers. So I'm going to stop because I don't want to give it away. But would you please just share that story?
Sure. Sure. It's a story that I often told my staff because a lot of people push back on the word customer in our profession. They don't like to hear that the program manager is our customer. They think of that old adage that says the customer is always right, which by the way, no, I don't believe that the customer is always right. I do believe though that you have to respect your customer and you have to treat them with decency, respect, and help them understand if they're not right. That's what experience is all about. But the story that I often tell is a Nordstrom experience that I had. I had never shopped at Nordstrom before. My husband's he grew up in the Seattle area, so he was very familiar with Nordstrom when they came into the area. So he encouraged me to go to them. And so periodically I would go over there. So it was Christmas, as a matter of fact. I was shopping for a gift for my husband. And I went into Nordstrom and I was looking for a particular product. And I went up to the sales associate because I didn't see it. And I said, hey, I'm looking for a particular product. And the sales associate said, oh, well, we don't sell that here. But hold on a second. And she immediately went into her computer, started looking up to find me a store that sold the product. But she didn't stop there. She found the store. Then she picked up the phone and called that store and asked if they had any available and would they hold one for me. That is customer service. That is a great customer experience. Because of that, I am an avid Nordstrom shopper.
Yeah.
Because of that experience, that remembering how she made me feel that here I was on the holidays, there's a line of people behind me waiting. They don't even sell what I want, but she stopped to find me what I needed and to make sure that it would be available before she sent me to that store. That is service. And that is what customer experience is all about. It doesn't matter whether or not even the store would have had the damn thing, right? It was the fact that she took the time to take care of me as a customer and say, what you need is important. What you want matters, and I'm going to make sure that you get it.
Yeah. I mean, it's powerful. It is so,
It
really is. It's a clear articulation of what going that next step, sometimes it's just one next step.
Well, and let me translate that into my own personal experience. So very early in my career, probably like when I was about 12, I think it was, I had a fairly difficult customer who wanted what he wanted when he wanted it, however he wanted it. And people like really struggled with him. And I got stuck with him. That's the way we used to describe him. And I remember this guy was adamant. It had to be a sole source procurement. It had to go to a particular company, blah, 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 blah. And he was resistant to everything. Like, don't tell me I got to justify it. Blah, blah, blah. It's the kind of person, right? So I went to meet with him the first time I met with him, and he already hated procurement because he hated all my fellow contracting officers because they were the ones that said no to him. So I go to his office and he's like barking at me what he wants. And I said, well, let me know when you're done. Because you know how I am. I'm not going to put up with people. I said, let me know when you're done. And then I'm going to tell you what I'm here to do for you.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me know when you're done. And he was like kind of taken aback by that. How dare she? Right. And I said, I'm not here as a contracting officer. I'm here to try to understand what it is that you need. If you really believe that's the only company that can do it, explain to me why. And I'll write your justification for you.
Right.
But if you can't convince me, here's what we're going to do. We're going to compete it. We're going to do a best value. And if they're the best company, they're going to win. And if they're not, you're going to end up with a better company. So let's sit down and talk. And I pulled out my little pad of paper and I said, so tell me, what is it that you need? What are you trying to do? What are you going to use it for?
Yeah. And
tell me why this company is the best one. Why they're the only ones that can do it. And it was interesting. He had a great description of what he wanted, why he wanted it, blah, blah, blah. But when it came to the company, he just kept saying, I've done business with them before and they're very reliable. They get it done for me. They've always delivered. They deliver on time, they deliver quality product, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, let's run a quick competition. And that's going to be part of the eval criteria.
Yeah.
Our top criteria,
Yeah.
performance.
Absolutely.
Ask
Reliability. Yeah.
And if they are the best, they will win.
Right.
So he, because he didn't trust, procurement, wanted to be the chair of the source selection board. And by the way, I've long held that on best value, let the program office be the source.
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah.
That's a good idea, right? Because this worked. Anyway, so he was. His team came back with a recommendation of another company. And after talking to his team, he accepted it. He accepted it. And then a year later, he told me, you were right. They were really good. Now this was his new favorite company.
Right.
But the point, I tell that story
Yeah.
because the customer experience, I didn't go in there and challenge his perspective.
Yeah.
I asked questions. I asked him to help me understand why. Let me understand what you're buying. Let me understand why you need it. And let me understand why you think they're the only one, or why you think that group or that company or whatever. It's the experience you give the customer. That person, by the way, would always ask for me whenever he had a problem.
I love it. I
If
love
he
it.
had a procurement, you go, well, somebody go talk to Soraya.
Yeah.
Get things done.
I love
It's
it.
experience. It's how you treat the customer and how you explain things to them. And yes, it was a much longer conversation than what I just gave you.
Sure.
But the point was, you earn the respect of your customer, and believe you me, they are going to listen.
I love it. I love it.
Even when they think they're right.
Yeah. I have often said in my career that great customers are informed customers.
Yes.
Okay. And informed customers aren't just found, they're created.
They are created.
They are created. So it takes the activity, just what you just said, this activity of being confident, knowledgeable in your space, understanding, listening, and turning what you hear into strategies that can deliver on the promise of effective procurement. Okay, it's a process.
I always said, and one of my little nuggets to the procurement community is listen to yourself. Put yourself in the shoes of a customer and deliver your salvo, however you deliver news to your customer, deliver it. But
Yep.
listen to how you say it.
Absolutely.
And think of if I was on the receiving end of that, would I really buy it? And only the mere arrogant, narcissistic personality will think they have the perfect speech in the beginning. I say that very honestly.
Yeah.
I have never sat down and thought about what I was going to say to a customer, and the first thoughts that I had
Right.
were perfect. I had to think it through, right? I started
Absolutely.
listening. Well, I could argue this. Blah, blah. Yeah, I do talk to myself a lot, by the way. It's my favorite person.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And what you're tapping into, Sarai, is I'm going to go back to my second point of honoring the craft.
Right.
There are some characteristics in our community, and as we build and grow, as we build junior contracting professionals, and as we grow as the individual growing into the contracting community, honoring the craft, meaning lean into the understanding of our business. We aren't just buyers. And some of the things I through the course of my career, I have seen this pendulum swing where we move from negotiators actually understanding the nuances of the deal to simply buying things off of pre-existing activities. So, and I understand why we do pre-existing work. It is to speed to market, understanding, efficiency. We do it for efficiency. But I tell you, in my opinion, there are times where the trade-off for efficiency is the lack of understanding. And it's like, it's a trade-off that isn't worth it. I'd rather take the time, bite the bullet on the speed to make sure we have the understanding of why are we doing this? Why are we trying to execute this strategy in this fashion? Why are we taking these various blocks of kind of the building blocks of acquisition and procurement and putting them together in this way, because they can be put together in many different ways. But if you don't understand the why behind it, you can put them together and you don't get the outcome that you're looking for. So honoring the craft in terms of knowing how to do the business, knowing how to put the blocks together to get the desired outcome, I think it's a big piece to success in the community.
Yeah, don't put strategy before need. You got to understand the need to come up with the strategy. I can't tell you how many times people come to me and go, oh, well, they're probably going to need an IDIQ contract that does X, Y, Z. And I go, well, what are they buying? Well, I don't know. Well, then how do you know it's an IDIQ?
Right.
I mean, exactly. Seriously, you got to understand what it is they need, when they need it, if there's anything unique about that need, in other words, how it has to be delivered, when it has to be delivered, who it's being delivered. What are the needs? You got to understand the parameters before you devise a strategy, right?
Yes.
And people just jump right to a strategy. Oh, we're going to use this best in class contract or this other vehicle.
Yes.
And I'm like, stop. Yeah. Why? And look, that's like a fundamental basic question that I asked as a chief procurement officer. Sometimes people come in with strategy. I go, well, why are you doing it this way? Did you look at this? Did you look at? And all of a sudden they go, oh, I didn't think about that. Well, you didn't think about it because you don't really understand the requirement. I could sometimes see people having aha moments as the program manager was explaining something to me. And if you're having an aha moment in front of your CEO as the program manager is explaining to her the program, you don't need to be in that room.
You're not ready yet.
The moment you want an aha.
You're not ready yet. Yeah.
The only person going aha should be me.
That is funny.
So my third nugget is, and this is a tough one. This is a real tough one, right? And that is set realistic expectations based on the need and the strategy. In other words, and when I say realistic, you're going to laugh because it's not about too short. It's about too long a time. Every time somebody told me that something was going to take a year, my head would explode. Have you ever watched, what is it, Kingsman? Have you seen that movie, Kingsman?
Yes.
Remember the heads exploding?
Yeah.
That would be a picture of me when somebody was, oh, it's going to take a year. I'm like, I can't fathom a year. I mean, I'll be alive in a year. No, I mean, I even be here. I want to see this thing come to an end, right?
Absolutely.
Just like, it's going to take a year. It's going to take 2 years because that's what traditionally people think. And that's what gives us a bad reputation when we just throw out those things. I think you build a realistic schedule with your customer and go, hey, you can give me a statement of work by this date, and you can give me funding or whatever the needs are.
Right.
Whatever the documents are, but whatever the needs are, you can get me all this stuff and I can put together a solicitation in this amount of time. You should take this amount of time to review it and build a realistic schedule. Not just slam, it probably takes about 2 years. Because it's not realistic. And a procurement should take what it needs to take, right? I can remember sitting with customers and saying, you know what, based on what you're telling me about your requirement and what we understand about the market, we probably need to spend some time talking to industry. So let's take the next 3 weeks or the next 4 weeks, right? Getting out some draft documents, getting some feedback, assessing that feedback, and then let's talk about the schedule. Yeah. Or I would ask, when do you need it by? You gotta have it by 30 September. My favorite 30 September, right? but when do you realistically need it by? I need it by X. Okay, so let's work backwards and see what we can introduce into the strategy to get you there. And by the way, one of the things that I used to always do, tell my customer, we're going to assume that we're going to get protest. At least the GAO. And that's 100 days right there.
Right.
If it goes full term. Now, if we don't get the protest, we're ahead of schedule. And if we get the protest, we've planned for it. And, you'd be surprised how many people, no, they don't plan for a protest. And I'm like, you should plan for it.
Absolutely.
Think about it. The only time you're not going to get a protest is when you did the perfect procurement. Let me know when you find one.
Right. Right. Yeah, I'll hold my breath.
It really, I mean, you might not get a protest if you have a really good debriefing and you have a good group of offers who really felt that, you handled all the discussions perfectly, but it's a risk to think that you're not going to get a protest.
Yeah, and we're not in control of it. That's my thing. We're not in control
of it. In this environment, assume it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a competitive market. You get protests sometimes because you pissed off the contractor. You gave him a crappy debriefing. You gave him a letter that's shallow and says, you didn't meet the eval criteria. Well, if you just give a shallow letter, assume you're going to get a protest. So I always planned very early when I was strategizing. I go, and here are the risks of protests, right? And here are the kinds of protests we could get. It's probably going to take 100 days of GAO. Can't predict Court of Claims, right? That's hard to predict. But GAO, we know generally it takes about 100 days. So we should factor that in, especially if delivery is essential, right? If there is a time issue. Because the other thing that people think about is overriding a protest. Well, what if we get a protest? Well, I know if we're going to override a protest when I'm strategizing. You do know that, right? Because you already know the criticality of the product.
Yes, that's right. It's built in. It's built in.
When
You're
people
going to
come up
override
like,
it.
surprise, I want to override the product. I'm like, who are you surprised? No,
Yeah.
you should have been thinking about that way back when. So that's what I mean by strategize, is that you really have to understand the need and plan for it and then set realistic expectations. Talk about the fact, what's the risk of protest? Talk about the impact of competition. Talk about where you could find delays. I used to warn customers all the time, we're going to put this thing out for 2 weeks. Chances are we're going to have to extend it at least by a week.
Yeah.
If you put it out for 1 week, you can probably end up extending by a week. You're going to end up extending. Okay. So just assume, right? Think about that. Now, you could put it out for the 3 weeks and say no extensions no matter what, but that's risky.
It is.
Because people can find something in your solicitation, right? So I used to talk about building that schedule with the customer and helping them understand where the pitfalls are in that schedule, helping them understand what you can do to avoid the pitfalls, what they can do and what you can do together to avoid the pitfalls. And if there are real pitfalls, get ready. This is going to happen.
Absolutely.
That's realistic. Then there's no surprises.
Awesome. So Soraya, your last comment about strategy and realistic expectations falls right into my last comment, and that is I've called it the theory of the bigger toolbox.
Mhm.
Meaning, at the contracting officer level, you have a toolbox. You look in your toolbox, you have a set of tools based on the procurement, based on the environment, based on the requirement. You have a set of tools, and you can solve that problem. You can attempt to solve that problem with your set of tools. But please know that people, that your organizational levels above you have bigger toolboxes, okay? So they've got some other tools in their boxes. So if the contracting officer goes to the division director, the division director says, "Oh, nice use of your tools, but look, I've got something else that I may be able to be a little bit more supportive of the environment, supportive of the procurement, supportive of the strategy." When you go to the HCA, there's like, "Oh, nice use of strategy. I like the way you use your tools, but guess what? I've got one that you don't have." Okay, so now we may be able to use this tool, and then it keeps going. I know that the CPO has some tools,
Exactly.
okay, that the HCA, I'm like, look, I've used everything I can have, but if we have a compelling story to tell the CPO, I need you to dig in your bag, see what you got. Maybe there's something in there that will help support, if the unique characteristics of the deal warrants CPO help.
Right.
That's what the CPO is, in my opinion, that's what the CPO is there for. And everybody's got a bigger tool bag. So just don't think about the solution to any acquisition challenge you have solely in it has to be fixed with your hammer and screwdriver. Some people's got some, there are levels way above you that have different tools that may be able to be helpful. So bigger toolboxes. Everybody has a bigger toolbox, and don't be, if you've got a compelling story. Now that's the first thing, you got to have a compelling story.
Of course.
Okay, and you got to have requirements that support that compelling story. But if you have those two things, please, I would encourage our community, don't fear going up the organization to go find the tool that will actually crack the code for whatever you need done in a given environment.
So my final one feeds off of yours. One of the tools in everyone's toolbox, whether the CO, the HCA, whoever, collaboration across.
Yes.
The answer may not sit right here you may need your partners. You may need to bring in your IT partners. You may need to bring in your logistics partners. You may need to bring in your finance partners. You may need to bring in other programs. Don't be afraid once you have that understanding of the requirement as you're sitting there strategizing to bring in your partners. And one of those partners that you cannot leave out of the equation is industry. Because here's the secret about industry. You don't know it all. They may. They do this. They sell this to other agencies, to each other, by the way. And they may have answers that you couldn't even think about. So that's one of the reasons that I always talk about that early engagement with industry. Before you put that solicitation together, RFI, whatever you want to call it, maybe just it's a conference with industry, but talk to industry, learn from them, ask them, what do you think? How would you do? How would you evaluate this? They'll tell you. As long as that RFP isn't final, they're going to give you, they'll share with you. That's the one thing I heard from industry quite a bit. We'd rather you talk to us as early as possible.
Sure.
And we're happy to share with you what we think about what are good evaluation criteria, what are good pricing strategies, what are good approaches to doing this. And remember, if you're talking to industry, you're getting feedback from a lot of them. So you're not giving anyone an unfair competitive advantage. And if you're doing it before the solicitation, you have ample opportunity to learn from them. So collaboration is a tool that sits in the toolbox of every single level, whether it's at the contracting officer, the HCA, the senior procurement executive, chief procurement officer, and even on the program manager side. Let us not forget, those same tools are sitting over on that program management side, right? That they can go up their chain. Sometimes when they go, oh, I got to have it done by Friday, the 13th or whatever it is, sometimes they need to go talk and understand, why do they need to have that done? What's so special about that day? It was one of the things that I used to ask very often, what's so special about that day? What's so special?
Right.
Because if I miss it and there was nothing special about it, I'm going to be mad.
Right. Agreed.
Right? Yeah. No, all kidding aside, what's so special about that day? Who lives or dies by that day? A lot of these dates are artificial, okay? They're a commitment to Congress or a commitment to this. And look, I'm not saying don't honor your commitments. Sure. Sometimes you got to go back to those folks and say, you know what? When we threw that date out was like 6 months ago. Funding didn't arrive till just the other day, where the requirement wasn't clarified. Sometimes you got to go and talk to people and say, this is why that can't be done. But here's what we're going to do. But have an alternative, have a strategy. Nothing I do more is somebody coming to me and look, can't do it. Yes, and your point is, and what are you doing for me lately? And I tell staff that if you don't think that's realistic, what I'm asking for, tell me what can be done. Come talk. That's what we need to learn to do. So that collaboration is one of those tools in that toolbox. I tie it to communications, right? Collaboration, communication, talk to one another.
I love it. I love it. And with that, Soraya, we're at time.
I knew it.
We could talk another hour, I'm sure.
Man. I'm like ready to go. I'm ready to go. We'll see.
Well, thank you and Happy New Year. Okay, I think it'll probably be after the new year for the next time we see each other, but happy New Year. This has been an amazing experience, and I so thank you so much for taking this journey with me.
Oh, no, I appreciate you inviting me on this journey. It's a lot of fun. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I think a lot of the things that we talk about sound so commonsensical, but sometimes people don't talk about it in that perspective. So it's a pleasure to talk to you, to talk with you, to our community, and to talk to our community through these
Absolutely.
podcasts. And I want to wish you a very safe and happy new year. I look forward to the year ahead. I think we're going to continue to have some of this fun, and we're going to invite some folks on to have some fun with us. But one of the things we have to do is we got to be careful. Those guest speakers can't take up all our time.
I know that's right.
When I get going, that's when you go,
we had to put them on a clock.
Get fired up, man.
Right. We had to put them on a clock. You only get 5 minutes.
I'm just kidding. Hey, you have a wonderful time. And to all the folks out there listening to us, Happy New Year. Wishing you
Happy New Year. All right, folks. Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye.